On January 20th, 2026, President Trump signed an executive order that sent ripples through the real estate industry. The goal: stop institutional investors from gobbling up single-family homes and squeezing out everyday families chasing the American dream. As someone who works with buyers and sellers every single day here in the tri-state area with Century 21, I can tell you this is a conversation I've been having with clients for years. Finally, someone at the federal level is paying attention. But here's the thing. While this executive order is absolutely a step in the right direction, it's only the first step. We've got a long way to go before we actually fix what's broken in the housing market. Let me be clear about what this order actually does, because there's been a lot of confusion and maybe even some overhyped headlines. The executive order does not outright ban institutional investors from buying homes. What it does do is limit conventional mortgage guarantees backed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for these types of purchases. In plain English, that means big investment firms can't use federally backed financing to buy up single-family homes anymore. If they want to keep buying, they'll need to find other ways to finance those deals or pay cash. And here's where it gets interesting, because the order includes some pretty significant exceptions. Build-to-rent properties that are planned, permitted, financed, and constructed specifically as rental communities, they get a pass. So we're not talking about stopping all investor activity. We're talking about creating guardrails. Now, why does any of this matter? If you've been house hunting in the last few years, you already know the answer. I've had countless buyers come to me frustrated, exhausted, and frankly, heartbroken because they keep getting outbid by cash offers from investment companies. These aren't your typical landlords who own a few rentals. These are massive institutional investors, sometimes backed by Wall Street money, who can swoop in with all cash offers that regular families just can't compete with. When a first-time buyer needs financing, needs an inspection period, needs a little time to think, they're at a massive disadvantage against an investor who can close in a week. No contingencies. It's not a fair fight. And families have been losing that fight for years. As a listing agent, I see this from the other side too. Sellers often love these investor offers. They're clean, they're fast, there's less risk of the deal falling apart. I get it. But collectively, what we're doing is turning single-family homes into investment commodities instead of places where families build their lives. We're watching neighborhoods change. We're seeing home ownership rates decline. We're creating a renter class in communities that used to be filled with homeowners who actually had a stake in the neighborhood. The long-term consequences of that shift are real, and they're not good for community stability or wealth building for average Americans. So yes, I'm glad the president signed this order. It acknowledges a problem that's been festering for years. It sends a message that policymakers understand families are getting squeezed out. It's a signal that maybe, just maybe, we're going to prioritize home ownership for people who actually want to live in these homes over profits for distant investors. That matters. Symbolically and practically, it matters. But let's talk about the limitations, because they're significant. First, and most obvious, this order only affects investors who were planning to use Fannie and Freddie-backed financing anyway. Any investor with enough cash or alternative financing can keep doing exactly what they've been doing. And let's be real, the big institutional players, they've got cash, they've got private equity, they've got credit lines that don't depend on federal mortgage guarantees. For them, this might be an inconvenience, maybe some restructuring, but it's not a brick wall. The order also doesn't specify geographic focus. It doesn't define how much control one entity can have through partial ownership. It doesn't require beneficial ownership reporting for for-profit entities. There are holes big enough to drive a truck through. The executive order also kicks the can down the road in important ways. It directs officials, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Kevin Hassett, to come up with specific policies within 30 days. They need to define what qualifies as a large institutional investor, and even what counts as a single-family home. Those definitions, they matter. Draw the lines too narrowly, and you've accomplished nothing. Draw them too broadly, and you risk catching small landlords who aren't the problem. Getting this right is critical, and we won't know how effective this really is until we see the details. Then there's enforcement. The order directs the Attorney General and the FTC to review acquisitions for anti-competitive practices, to prioritize enforcement against coordinated vacancy and pricing strategies. That's great in theory, but enforcement requires resources, attention, and political will. It's one thing to write an order. It's another thing entirely to make sure someone's actually watching when companies push boundaries or find workarounds. Critics are already saying this won't meaningfully improve affordability, that it interferes with markets without addressing the housing shortage. And look, they're not entirely wrong. You can limit who buys homes all you want, but if there aren't enough homes being built, prices stay high. The real problem, especially here in the tri-state, is inventory. We've been underbuilding for over a decade. Zoning restrictions, skyrocketing construction costs, labor shortages, all of it. Limiting institutional investors doesn't build a single new home. So, where does that leave us? I think this order is a good start, but that's exactly what it is, a start. What we need is a comprehensive approach. Yes, keep institutional investors from distorting the market, but also make it easier and cheaper to build. We need zoning reform, more density, more housing types, incentives for builders to create starter homes people can actually afford. We need to address material costs, labor shortages, streamline permitting. We need to think creatively. Manufactured housing, a DUS, every tool available. And we need an honest conversation. Do we want neighborhoods of homeowners invested in their streets, schools, and businesses? Or are we okay with neighborhoods dominated by rentals owned by faceless corporations in another state? There's no wrong answer, but the choice we make will shape communities for the next generation. I know which one I prefer, and I think most families I work with feel the same way. From my perspective, as someone who lists and sells homes for a living in this market, anything that helps level the playing field for regular buyers is welcome. I want to help families find homes, not watch them get outbid again and again and again. I want to see young couples buy their first house, build equity, put down roots. So that's why I got into real estate in the first place. So yes, I'm encouraged. It shows someone is listening, but I'm also realistic. This is one tool in a much bigger toolbox. We've got work to do at the federal level, state, local, builders, developers, policymakers, real estate professionals, all pulling in the same direction. The housing crisis didn't happen overnight, and it won't be solved overnight, but I'm optimistic we're finally having the right conversations. I'm hopeful this is the beginning of a broader push to make homeownership accessible again. And I'm committed, personally and professionally, through my work here at Century 21, to being part of the solution. If you're trying to navigate this market, whether you're buying or selling, I'm here to help you understand what this means for you. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Real people, real families, real homes. Give me a call when you're ready to buy or sell. See you next time.